Spider-Man Miles Morales always seemed to be the little brother of the Spider-Man PS4 game, and with Spider-Man 2 coming out, this game has been almost completely eclipsed, it seems, and viewed more as DLC to the first game rather than its own thing. And that is so messed. Spider-Man Miles Morales is not just mediocre DLC, it's a really good game and should not be overlooked. And with Across the Spider-Verse recently coming out, I feel it's time to give some love to Miles in his Spider-Man game because it deserves it. So let's talk about why Spider-Man Miles Morales deserves the hype still 3 years later. Now this game is a sequel to Spider-Man PS4, which is one of my favorite games. This time though, we're following Miles instead of Peter. It's a much shorter game following a more personal story on Miles as he has to take over Spider-Man in New York while Peter's on vacation. It's a smaller premise and it has a smaller scope compared to the first game, but that's a great part of it. The story shows us Miles as he feels the pressure having to take on such a huge legacy and everything that comes with being Spider-Man. It's a great concept, and the whole idea and theme of him learning that he is Spider-Man by helping people and truly being himself is such a strong theme and shows him growing into being his own Spider-Man and how he's different from Peter. And one of the best ways that they show his difference is by the gameplay. I adore how much this game shaked up the combat to show how Miles is different. Here, unlike Peter, he is much more physically based, being much quicker using venom attacks instead of gadgets and just having a much faster pace. It feels like he's more out of a fighting game. Getting combos is so much easier now with Miles just due to how much faster and more physical he is compared to Peter. And this is no shade of the original Spider-Man game because still, going back to it, it still holds up. Peter's just a more reserved Spider-Man, using more gadgets and hitting harder than Miles. But I think I prefer Miles' gameplay. It's just so much more fun and energetic and so fast. And while I don't know I'd say it's better, it feels very different and completely its own thing and not derivative of the first game. Something though that I can easily say is just a straight up improvement on the first game is the web slinging. It is just so perfect, it's incredible, it's amazing. It is just so much better. The individual animations, the way they stitch them together, it's just all seamless and all of it just feeling so smooth, and swinging around is just so much faster and so much more fun to do. And the way the Miles just switches from move to move is perfect and really shows off the exaggerated swagger of a black. This is 100 times better than the first one. It's not even close. Going back to Spider-Man PS4 feels like I'm controlling a grandpa in Spider-Man underwear. The gameplay, from swinging to combat to even puzzles, has improved either slightly or dramatically in certain spots. Insomniac is still at the top of their game when it comes to presentation and character design. Like this Prowler design, it's so good. And the game on a visual level feels very distinct and its own thing, which is absolutely necessary when you're adapting a character like Miles, who is given such a definitive origin story and adaptation in his own film Into the Spider-Verse. And I think this game on its own merits completely stands alone greatly from the first game and truly tells a Miles story in this universe that truly feels earned and is an excellent origin adventure for him. But the one thing that slightly knocks this game down a bit is how the story and Miles himself constantly feel that they're in the shadow of Into the Spider-Verse. The biggest thing I think this game has against it is how they have to adapt Miles and make him different from the Into the Spider-Verse incarnation. And here they do a fine job of making him different enough. This version wears Adidas instead of Jordans. Ooh. But I never found his character as charismatic or as interesting as I wanted to. This version of Miles is fine, but he just never was that interesting to me. He never felt distinct enough from Peter, and his voice acting never elevated his material like Yuri Lowenthal's performance for Peter did. His voice acting always feels like an impression of a teenager rather than a naturally sounding one. I think one of the main reasons this game is overlooked is because of how Miles here feels like a great value version of Miles Morales. And he's not bad by any means, it's just the problem is the version of Miles in Into the Spider-Verse has so much character and personality and little details in him that this version just lacks. And I think this has led to the game being partly viewed as a lesser game compared to Spider-Man PS4, even though quality-wise, it's nearly on par. The designs and adaptations for every other character other than Miles are near perfect. Prowler here is fantastic and is completely fleshed out, along with Tinkerer, who is great and has a great design, even a Rhino, who for the first time I've actually respected as an actual character and villain. Nearly every character here is great, and the story is actually really good, telling a strong personal story of Miles taking on the responsibility of being the only Spider-Man, along with having to take down an evil corporation called Roxxon and a terrorist group rising up called the Underground, which is led by the Tinkerer. We see this class war break out onto the streets, and Miles struggle with agreeing with the Underground, but not at all with their methods. It's a really strong story and does what it sets out to achieve effortlessly. Yet it always feels a little disappointing because while it's really good, it doesn't reach the pure perfection that Into the Spider-Verse is, and it doesn't even even reach the perfection that the first game's story was. But this game has at its core what made those two stories great, because it's about capturing Spider-Man's essence to his core. And Spider-Man Miles Morales does that with the feeling of rising up to be your own hero. And the story of Miles coming into his own is perfectly executed, and his rise to being Spider-Man is done so well here. And it was when I stopped comparing this game to what came before that the game really started to shine with what it was doing. Spider-Man Miles Morales had a nearly impossible task in not only living up to the first Spider-Man PS4 game, but also living up to possibly the greatest comic book superhero movie ever made. And Spider-Man Miles Morales truly does that, completely building off the excellent combat and improving it, along with supercharging the swinging and bringing Miles and all of his supportive cast to life just as beautifully as the first Spider-Man game did. And while it isn't perfect and its main character and story do end up holding the game a bit back, this game is still incredibly underrated, and I think this game proves itself to be just as worthy to carry the title of Spider-Man and worthy of all the hype still 3 years later.